years, and I see you in the audience tonight, and I'm so blessed that God's provided a way. But at that time, I couldn't quit because there was no one else who would do the ministry. So, but God used the ministry to bless me, and it's really awful because my daughter had been away and she came back, and you would just, if you would poke me, the love of Jesus was not coming out of me. It was bitterness, and she would get this horrified look on her face, and she would go, 5 things. I want to hear 5 positive things. And I would go, I can't think of anyone. I can't think of anything. You know, and it's just, I just really respect my family for sticking through with me during that time. It's hard when you see someone in pain and, you know, you can't help them. But in the midst of that, I still had the call of God on my life, and I still had the promise of God. And I wanted to keep pursuing healing, so I went to this Hem of His Garment school, which is an amazing school sponsored by Bethel Church in Redding, California, about how some of the keys they found as they pursued God for healing. And one of the things that they shared at this Hem of His Garment school is that impartation can get you to the next level. And I wanted to go to the next level. So I decided to go to this ministry trip to Taiwan. And sort of like, you're like, well, maybe if I don't write everything down, they won't have enough discernment to realize I'm not in a great spiritual place. And so, but you know, we're all, when we're in bitterness and unforgiveness, and we have resentment built up, we're just so open to the lies of the enemy, right? We just believe anything about ourselves because there's too much junk plugging the vacuum cleaner, isn't there? And so I went to Taiwan, and with Randy Clark, and one of the key focuses of Randy Clark is unforgiveness, because he's been a part of a big renewal in South America, in Brazil, and one of the keys they found that keep people in bondage is unforgiveness. And so as I prepared, I felt like I'd done a lot of work, but as I saw people being held in bondage and then set free because of unforgiveness, I'd go home from prayer time, from like ministry time in the stadium, and you get on your knees and you deal with your own unforgiveness, don't you? And I sensed such freedom and such liberation. And it didn't mean the things that had happened didn't continue to upset me, but I just handled them differently. And I think Chuck said something like, "You're back, and you're really back." You know, it's you back again. Yay, Jesus. It's just, you know, when I couldn't help myself, His grace found me and pulled me up and lifted me. He's just, Graham Cook says, He's the kindest person He knows. And He really is that kind. So a couple months after that, I had a chance to go and learn about the Sozo ministry. Bethel Sozo ministry is a prayer ministry that deals a lot with unforgiveness. And I just thought, I'll be fine, because I've just had all these experiences with unforgiveness. But what I didn't realize is that I've always been really thankful for my older brother, because I'm a sort of scaredy cat, to be quite honest. I don't have a real big sense of adventure. People who know that I sailed to New Zealand from France go, "Really?" And I go, "You don't know my husband. He has great marketing skills." and he also does know how much I love to travel. I'm kind of a scaredy cat, but my brother is like this go-for adventurer, and he would be like, but he loves companionship, so he'd be like, "Come along," you know, and I have all these memories of skiing, and he'd go, "This run's not that hard," and I'm like, "What does the black diamond mean?" You know? And I'm like, you know, knee deep in powder, and I'll fall and lose my skis. I'm crying, and finally I'll get to the bottom of the hill, and he'd be like, "Where were you?" So all my life, he's led me on these great adventures. But as an adult, I had said, "Oh, it was so good that I had a brother like that. Otherwise, I would have never learned to overcome fear, and I would have never done anything exciting. And that would have been sad." Except that I realized in my Sozo prayer time, I realized that Jesus is like our older brother, isn't he? And my older brother had taken me on adventures and left me to fend for myself and left me behind. And he'd taken me to places that were really scary for me and left me. And I realized, oh my gosh, that's one of my favorite prayers that I pray with Jesus. You're mixing me up with someone who has courage. Isn't there somebody else? And I realized that I needed to forgive my brother. And I realized that all these years I thought there had been this pressure from Jesus to do things that I was scared to do. And in my sozo, I realized the pressure is never from Jesus. And it just was such a freeing thing for me personally that after you've been a Christian your whole life and you realize God, and you just keep finding deeper and better and richer things about Jesus, and you find out he's actually more kind than you ever gave him credit for, it's just an amazing thing. So I love the Sozo ministry, and most times when we do Sozo ministry, not every time, but most times there's this moment where people encounter God in a way that they haven't before, and they just say, I didn't know you loved me that much. And it's just such a privilege. So I'm finally getting around to China, so thank you for your patience while we got there. So when Kate Judson, who's been so influential in teaching us about Sozo, came to visit last time, she mentioned that she had gone to China. I said, where did you go in China? And as Garth said, she said, oh, did you see that movie, Furious Love? And did you hear about that orphanage? And I said, yes. And she said, that's where I went to minister. And I was like, do you do this with the kids? And she's like, no, we're doing Sozos with the staff. And one of the things, we'll talk about it later, but one of the things is that you need healed people working with broken people, right? How many people know broken people working with broken people is more brokenness, isn't it? And we all know that. Yeah. And sometimes I'm the broken person and sometimes I'm the healed person. So if you've been a healed person helping me through my brokenness, thank you. Thank you. So I just said, well, I want to see how Sozo works in another culture. I want to see Chinese people experience the love of God. So I just said to Kate, you wouldn't want somebody to go with you, would you? And she said, what do you want to do? Do you want to do medical stuff? And I said, no, I don't want to do medical stuff. I want to do Sozos. And so Kate's very thoughtful, so she thought and she said, okay. And so after a wee bit of drama, I ended up going to Fuzhou, China. And Josh, if I could have the slides. But to Hidden Treasures Home, thank you. And I'm going to try two things. One, turning it on. Ooh, yes, so far so good. And secondly, and this is Mike and Dina Van Hoot. And this is, as Garth shared a little bit about their story, I'll fill in a few more details. They were touched by God radically in about 2000. And they knew they had to do something differently. They went on an overseas short-term mission trip to Africa and felt like they needed to do something for the poor of the world. So they went to China and adopted Priscilla, who's the little girl there. And they brought her home to America and continued on, but they couldn't get the call to China out of their heart and life. So they decided, but they didn't know what it was about China, where they should go, or what they should do. So they took a huge faith risk and stepped out and went to China and just saw what God was going to do next. And they knew that they knew when they went, because they didn't know what they were going to do or where they were going to go, that a year later they might come back and say, well, we gave it a go, but we didn't, I guess that was it. We didn't find anything. But they decided it was better to take the risk and follow God. And that's the kind of people they are. And so their kids are a little older now, and the little boy, Caleb, they've adopted as well as part of their family. So through a series of circumstances, they became aware of the plight of disabled children in orphanages in China, and they wanted to help. And so they started this place called Hidden Treasures Home in 2005. And they started with 6 babies who had cleft lip, cleft palate. They were given 6 babies. They went from 0 to 6 all at once. And they did all the care themselves. They treated everybody like family. And they started to build their ministry. What I really love is they have this attitude that every one of these children is our family, and we will settle for only the best for them. And so we're going to believe God for the finances so they can have the best. And do you know how hard it is when you work among orphans not to adopt an orphan in a poverty spirit? When you work among neglected people, if you work with people in severe poverty or who've had neglect, you know how hard it is not to partner with that and not to say, we'll just make do. But they have held their ground, and as a result, they have a beautiful, beautiful place for these children. One of the reasons this is Dina with 2 of the little girls who have Down syndrome. They're just absolutely delightful. So their ministry today has grown to the place where they have 65 children. Some of them have Down syndrome, brittle bone. They have, I think, 6 children with blindness, 3 of whom were born without eyes. And they have children with varying degrees of cerebral palsy and other conditions that make them unadoptable. This is one of their baby rooms. All the kids go down for afternoon naps, and it's just beautiful to see them. And you can see the high quality of the furnishings and the beautiful things they provide. So this is Kate Judson, and here she is preaching with an interpreter. This precious girl has a beautiful story. She's now 19, but she had a very difficult beginning of her life in that she was living in one of the really remote villages, and her mother abandoned the family, and then her dad passed away. So she was taken in by an uncle and aunt, but then the uncle passed away. And in that part of China, in the remote village, they were very superstitious. And so then she's bad luck, 2 men, 2 of her fathers have died. And so she was sent back to the city. But her mother had gone to, and they found her mother. But her mother had kind of gone on with her life and wasn't ready to accept her back as a daughter, and so treated her like a servant. And so when she was 12 years old, somebody in the family, somebody observed how she was being treated and said, you should go to this house that has Westerners in it. You'll be treated better there. And so she ran away from home and just appeared on their doorstep. And God has amazingly restored this young woman. She's just glowing with God's love. She's been reconciled to her family, and she works along in the ministry with them. And beautiful, and did a lot of translating for our Sozos for us. here's some of the kids. They're just delightful to be around. So obviously you have 65 children. They all need caregivers. So they have 65 full-time caregivers and about 12 internationals on staff. This is the official. They're in an outskirts of Fuzhou, which is a backwater city in China of 7 million people. And this is just the outskirts of the city and the view where you can see that a village has a really different meaning in China. And there's beautiful mountains, but because of the pollution and the smog, you can't see them. And I'm not sure if you can. They have a really interesting housing development program in that everybody's in the process of building their house, but you only build for as much money as you have. So this house has like you can see, it's incomplete in the top 2 stories. There's no windows in the top 3 stories, and they're living in the bottom 2 stories and just building as they get money. So it's interesting to see how different countries solve the problem of high mortgage rates. So they don't have mortgage, but they have unfinished houses. So, or in process, but ours is too. So I guess that's thing. And what's really beautiful is they are believing God for healing, divine healing for their children. So they have regular soaking prayer ministry time for them. There's some cutting-edge research that isn't really that there may be some evidence to the kids being in hyperbaric oxygen chambers for brain function, and it's used with divers. So somebody donated a hyperbaric oxygen chamber, so the kids spend time in a hyperbaric oxygen chamber with a caregiver and toys. But it's just like anything that God lays on their heart for the healing of these children, they'll do. Every child they take in, they commit to caring for them for life. So Down syndrome, people with Down syndrome can live into their 50s. And so every child they take, it's a 50-year commitment. And so they're believing God for strategies as these children go up. They're taking a risk now that in 20 years, God will have opened up a strategy for what to do with all these young adults. That's risk, isn't it? That's risk. And they're, one of the things I really respect, this is some of the international staff, and this wonderful lady, Jamie, here, is a pediatric nurse. And so she went from having full Western support, a doctor available to call any time, subspecialists right there, to basically providing care for 65 children with really significant medical problems. And each of these people have different roles and different, what I just think is so fun is different levels of Chinese skill. The young man in the back is quite fluent in Chinese, but most of the people sitting around the table struggle. And 2 of those people are just short-term volunteers. So you need a team to create the vision, to make the vision come true. And what I really was blessed by is that they allow short-term people to come in. And how many people have been on a short-term mission trip? Yeah. It changes you, doesn't it? It changes you. And I really encourage people to look for the opportunity to go, because it will, not only do you see God at work in different cultures, and that's so exciting to know he isn't just a God for New Zealand. He's not just a God that works in one place. He works around the world in unique and powerful ways. And then you come back and go, oh, this little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine, shine. I'm going to take a risk today, a small risk, but I can't hold back anymore. So this is an example of the kind of care they give. This wee baby came to them in July, and he has cleft lip, cleft palate, and a heart some sort of heart murmur. We don't really know what it is, and he's been basically sick with some lung infections on and off since he's been there. And the first week they got him, he was so desperately sick that they took him to the hospital. And in China, you have to pay up front for your hospital in their particular setting. They have to pay up front. And so they took money that they didn't have to pay for him to be in the hospital because they say, we want the best. We want the best. So he was in intensive care for about 2 weeks. And the day that payroll was due, they were short 2 paychecks. And so they were going to have to call in 2 people and say, we can't pay you. And just the administrator called the people, texted the people saying, come in to talk to me. And she just checked the bank account one last time, and the money had come in. And but they said, they just prayed about it, and they felt like, no, we have to do the best. We have to do the best. That's our call. And so after 2 weeks, they told him so many times he was going to die, but then they felt in their hearts that the hospital had done everything they could. So they're like, well, can you take him off the ventilator and see if he'll breathe on his own? And they're like, no, if we take him off the ventilator, then you have to take him home because we won't put him in our regular pediatric floor because he's too sick. And so they, again, had to make a faith decision. So they made the faith decision to take him home, and he got better. But he got worse again while we were there. So they put him on oxygen, and a sick baby like this, he needed suctioning, he needed fluids. They gave him fluids through a nasogastric tube, a tube that went from the outside of his body right to his stomach, and he needed somebody sort of with him around the clock. And so people would come and they would sign up for shifts and come in on their days off and care for this, so that this little boy didn't have to be alone at any time. And so he had one-on-one care for all the days that I was there. And he would be breathing 80 to 100 times a minute, which is really super fast. And I would think, how can this wee little boy survive the night? And he would be there the next day. And I got an email from Jamie just a few days ago, and I actually thought it was going to be to tell me that he had died. And it actually was telling me he'd recovered. So it's just amazing to see what love and sacrifice and taking a risk in faith can accomplish. And as I talked with Dina about this wee boy's situation, she said, we've seen a baby die and be resurrected. The second baby who died in our children's home was resurrected. And she said, but we've also held babies who've died in our arms, and we know that angels carried them to heaven because that's what the scripture teaches, and that and that both of those things are the work of God, and we just believe God every time that we're going to see healing, and if we don't, then we believe God to comfort our hearts. That's a life of faith, isn't it? That's the kind of thing we want to press in to see the miraculous in our life and take the risk, because really the risk of not believing for the miraculous is higher, right? We can protect ourselves from disappointment, and we can protect ourselves from looking stupid, and we can have a mediocre life, and that's okay. And or we can, and we'll see, and God will still love us, won't He? And He still sent Jesus to buy it all. But I really think there's something bigger in my heart to keep stepping out, keep taking risks, keep looking foolish, and expecting great things from God. Okay, so I'll just keep talking. So that's his story. Of course, these are the 3 cooks who cooked for the children every day. And what was really neat is to see what it takes to start a new work and do something absolutely creative. When they hired staff, these staff did not know how to play with children because that wasn't part of their cultural tradition, and they didn't know how to provide enrichment for disabled children. So they didn't know how to wash their hands. They didn't know how to do things that were necessary to build a ministry. And so they had to start from scratch and build things a little bit, a little bit, a little bit. And as they started, things were very difficult. People didn't understand what they were doing or why they were doing it, because in their particular situation, there wasn't a lot of value for disabled children. There's a lot of complex cultural things, and in fairness, I asked myself, how many families with disabled children have I reached out to here in Invercargill, to help lighten their load? And I realized that's something I'm praying into. Is there anybody that, God, you want to highlight to me that I can serve in my own community? I mean, I made a big effort. I took annual leave. I paid a plane fare to go serve Chinese disabled children, but probably there's people God wants to highlight right down my street, isn't there? Forgive me, I just got distracted by that thought. Oh yeah, staff. That's what I was wanting to talk about. And so sometimes when God gives you a vision and a dream to do something for him, plowing the ground and starting a foundation can be quite challenging, and you can feel all alone. And so they started this ministry in 2005. And Dina said when they took over the building, it was so filthy, and it was so dirty. It was an old, unused kindergarten that they actually had to scrub with toothbrushes because the dirt was so embedded into everything. I mean, that's what it's really like a lot of times when you're starting something new. And as I said, people didn't understand them, and there wasn't a lot of support. Of course, now it is. Now it's 8 years later, and they're in a season of favor. And so they have a lot of donations from the community right now. And they've made a point of opening up the homes so that people from the community can look. And they think they have about 50 Chinese visitors every week. And because of that, how many people know if you feel completely helpless, you're not really drawn to something, are you? So if you go, we're going to help disabled children, you go, I can't do that. But when people tour the children's home and see what kind of help they need, then they go, well, I can donate bread. I can donate clothes. And so it's kind of interesting. Of course, China's economy is booming. If you've noticed how many made in China stickers there are on things. And because of that, there's like a boutique children's clothing place, and they donate their extra clothes to here. So here are these orphans that were really unloved, unwanted, and they come into this Hidden Treasures home and cherished immediately and get to wear designer clothes. This is one of the cheeky guys who, just to show you. I'm gonna just tell you one more thing about Mike and Dina, and then I'll close. So you can see that Mike and Dina paid a high price to establish this ministry. They've given it their whole heart, and it just what an amazing accomplishment if that's all they did. But God started speaking to them about going to the next level, and also as they prayed into the future of these kids, they said, we're going to have something more. And they had a vision for a whole, not just a children's home, but a whole hospital. And then as they made inquiries about what you needed to be in charge of a hospital in China, they found out you need your doctorate or PhD. And it didn't matter what your doctorate was in, just that you had one. And so Dina consents that in the future God's going to call her to build a hospital. And so she said, well, to Mike, one of us has to get our doctorate. And so Dina is now in a program to get her PhD by distance learning with block courses. And so she's had to lay down the direct contact with the children that was her lifeblood. She had to lay that down so she could study for the next season that God's calling her to. And I think, again, like the lesson for me is that what God calls you to do with all your heart. The question, the thing that was really challenging for me was, our mission field is all around us, and we can start with something small that can turn into something radical for God, that even a small stone creates a ripple, that creates a ripple, that creates a ripple. I want to be part of a ripple effect. And then the third thing that really spoke to me is don't hold back from investing in your future, in your destiny with God. Because there's a dream in your heart for a reason. Thank you for letting me share.
Wow. Come on. Can I get the musos to come back up, please? Isn't that an amazing tale to tell? Just of what it is to... Wow, I'm listening to that going, what does it look like when we co-labor with God? Like He entrusts us with so much that He gets us to co-labor with Him. We step out in faith, and all of a sudden things open up and opportunities open up around us. And not every story might be a Mike and Dina story, but each one of us is being called by God to step out in faith, to co-labor with Him, to be an ambassador of Christ in the earth around us, to bring change to our communities, to bring transformation in the lives around us, to reach out in faith. And, I love what Tabitha was saying, even if it's someone just down the street. Wow, there's opportunities all around us to share the love of Christ. So, amen. We're going to end in a great song of praise.